What's going on, everybody? Welcome on into another Sixers podcast here with me, JJ. I hope you're all doing well. Before we dive into today's press conference with Nick Nurse being introduced as the new head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, I just want to remind you guys, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon as well, so that way you know when I go live for a Sixers podcast or a Sixers game, even though the season's already done. But we'll be doing more games next season. So if you guys enjoy my Sixers content or my Phillies content or Flyers or Patriots content, make sure that you subscribe and hit the like button down below. And with that, we're also just going to get into the whole Nick Nurse thing in just a few moments after I also make this announcement. So if you guys want to come on and give your thoughts about the Nick Nurse hiring and that type of a thing, if you want to come on to the Discord server, I invite you guys to come on right now, and you guys can have a conversation with me after this opening monologue is done, and I want to get your thoughts about where you think that the Sixers are going to go and how great of a hiring this is. So with that, let's talk about Nick Nurse and the 76ers. So today's press conference, it actually really was enlightening in a lot of ways just to hear what just came out of Nick Nurse's mouth. And I'm actually... And maybe this is just me, being blindsided by things, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do to try to improve the roster with the way the team is currently constructed. Do they have a lot of things to figure out? Yes, they do, for sure. We don't know what's going to happen with Tobias Harris. We still don't know what's going to happen with James Harden and that type of a thing. But there were definitely some really good things that I took away from this press conference. First of all, I loved his demeanor. He is very honest. He is very open about what he wants to do. And he goes over even a couple of schematics. I wrote a lot of quotes down, and I'm going to get to them in just a few moments. But just my overall takeaway from this press conference today is that I think that he was the right candidate for the job. And it seems like from just the tone, just from the eye contact, just from listening to what he had to say, it felt very refreshing to actually hear a head coach talk about the way that the team is right now and what he can do to try to move this team forward. I don't think that the Sixers have had a good coach since Larry Brown. Doc didn't necessarily do some things that I was a fan of. There were things about his coaching style. I always questioned what he went over during practices. Not even just about the rotations and the schematics. It was just about how he had his relationship with the players. And I really do believe that there's something to be said about Nick Nurse winning at every single level. He won at the G League level. He won overseas in the UK twice. And he also won at the NBA level. And that tells me that he knows how to coach talent and get the best out of everybody. Coming into today, when he talked on the JJ Redick podcast, he said that quote, "You have to coach winning." One of the goals for the coach is how can we make everybody valuable to the NBA marketplace? That's what I want to hear from my head coach. I want everybody to get better. But in order for me to do that, I got to get to know my players. I got to get to know what their strengths and weaknesses are. But my job, basically he's saying, is to get everybody better. The message is clear from that perspective. Mike Sealski said, from the Philadelphia Inquirer, his question was, okay, so he said, quote, "You took some criticism in Toronto for criticizing players reportedly in public before you spoke with them behind closed doors. How accurate was that? And is that something you need to rectify?" End quote. And Nick Nurse's response here, just listen to this. Quote, "Well, first of all, communication and relationships is the key to doing this job really well. And always communicate directly with the players on anything if there's issues, schemes, or if there's improvement areas or anything like that. Be very direct and handle that stuff one-on-one, face-to-face, and sometimes in team settings. Communication is the key to being a successful head coach. End quote. That's what I like to hear. Doc Rivers had a very hard time of communicating with his players. The message was not clear. Joel made it clear that he is not the leader of this team. He just did. And Nick Nurse gets into players' faces and reps' faces as well. He shows the energy, okay? And while maybe he did that in public and he acknowledges that, he did it for the team. It's part of being a head coach. It's part of what, if it leads to success, I'm fine with it. By all means, do it. I don't have anything wrong with that. And I thought that that was a really cool quote. And that's something that I want to hear from my head coach. Accountability is something that the Sixers have been lacking for so many years. And I think that we're finally getting a guy who understands the players, who understands how to deal with talent, and how to deal with egos. It didn't end too well in Toronto, but not everything lasts really well. And I think that this new job is going to be something that I'm looking forward to. And that was one quote that I really liked. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that he said, quote, "This team could actually be playing tonight. I don't really vibrate on the frequency of the past. To me, when we get a chance to start and dig into this thing a little bit, it's going to be only focused on what we're trying to do going forward. It's a clean slate for me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can get it done from start to finish." And just to bounce off of that quote, Daryl, when talking about Nick Nurse, I noticed he used two words a lot in this press conference today. He said that he was a creative basketball mind. That was one term that I heard like 3 times come out of his mouth. He's a creative basketball mind. And the other one that he used was unlocking talent. That was the other phrase I've heard a couple of times from Daryl's mouth. And I find it really interesting because it kind of just backs up everything that I've been saying about Nick Nurse all along, is that he knows not only how to get the best out of his players, but he knows what buttons to push. A couple of years ago, he was talking openly how with that 2018-19 Raptors team, how when they lost the first game to Orlando and they got destroyed, the next day, Kyle Lowry, Kawhi Leonard, Pascal Siakam, and Marc Gasol all went into that film room and figured out what their weaknesses were from that game, and Nick Nurse stayed there for so many hours just to try to figure out like what the team could see and what they had to do moving forward. Okay, it sounds so simple, but I seriously do question if Doc Rivers did that for the Sixers. I really do. Because those things add up. It's those little things. Point out what the weaknesses are and figure out how we can get better at adjusting on the fly and make the team a lot better. So that was something else that was really cool. He also said that he studied the Sixers a lot in preparation for playing them. But as he also dove deeper into studying them, he said, quote, "I'm going to keep all the things I think are very applicable and that this team does really well. We're going to try and cut out some of the things that we can improve upon, and it will develop from there, and that journey is going to start on day one." It's going to be a journey, he said. And I think that that's something that's also really important to emphasize, is that it's not going to just be done over one day. Right? He talked about how the coaches are going to have to get to know the players, and the players are going to have to get to know the coaching staff, and it's going to take time to develop that chemistry. I just feel like that while I acknowledge that there's a lot of problems still with this roster, I do feel like that there is something to be said about the head coach, the guy that's at the helm, making the plays, calling the practices, going over what they're going over at practice, right? Establishing the relationships with the players. Those things do matter. And if it leads to success, which it has for Nick Nurse in years past, why not try it? And I liked how he was able to put that out there and talk about it. And then the other thing that also was really emphasized today was about the whole Kawhi Leonard and the load management thing in regards to how they're going to do that with Joel Embiid. And it sounds like from his tone that he acknowledges that he's probably not going to stagger as many minutes for Joel, and he has to be really careful about it. That was one of my main concerns. I said that a couple of days ago when I talked about the hiring of Nick Nurse. Will he be able to recognize that Joel has to be healthy, right? That health is like the number one thing when it comes to Joel Embiid. You got to keep him healthy. And he acknowledged that today. And I think that that is absolutely important because the last thing that we want is another injured Joel Embiid when it comes to the playoffs. And if we can prevent that from going into the second round, and if we have a head coach that understands that, we're fine. I like our chances a lot better in regards to that. So that was another concern that I had, and I think that he kind of validated that and understood what it takes now for this team to succeed. And he even talked about how he even, talked to everybody, like all the star players, including James Harden. John Clark asked him if he even talked to James Harden and what the message would be if he were to come back. And he said, I don't have the quote written down, but he basically, the paraphrase, he said that winning is something that's always going to sell a player. And I do believe that he fully does believe that if James Harden does come back, that this team has a chance. And I don't necessarily know if I agree with him on that, but maybe that there's something else that he can unlock out of James Harden that we've never seen before. I just don't know if it's going to work. But I like the attitude. I do. You guys, he said, quote, like when they were talking about the second round and how they're going to get over the second round, he realized that reporters were bringing that up over and over again. And this is what he had to say in regards to that. And this is actually what got my juices flowing. Quote, you guys mentioned the second round to me already. Okay, we will hit that nail on. We know we're judged with how we play in the playoffs. The reality is, that's the truth. I'd imagine on day one, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to attack that head on. Can we tactically improve things and adjust on the fly and improve as the season goes on? That is what I have to do and figure out. That's what a coach does. I love it. You sold me. You did. It doesn't solve all the problems, but he acknowledges that that is something that has to be emphasized on day one. They got to make it past the second round. They do. And Nick Nurse has a lot of emotion. He takes a lot of pride into what he does. And he's going to really do everything that he can in his power to try to get that all done. And just hearing that from his mouth made it put a big smile on my face. Because that's what the Sixers have needed for so long. I'm not telling you, do not get this misconstrued. I'm not telling you that they're going to make it out of the second round just because of Nick Nurse. What I will tell you is that with the talent that they have going into the season and playing throughout the season, I think that they're going to play a much cleaner style of basketball. A lot of times I would see stagnant ball movement and a lot of ISOs from people like James Harden, Joel, Tobias, right? A lot of guys were ISOing. And I feel like that Embiid will ISO at times, and Maxi's going to ISO at times too. But there's going to be more fluidity when it comes to the ball movement, because that's how Nick Nurse coaches. Along with the three-point shooting, he has emphasized that again, that he wants to make that a priority because he acknowledges how the landscape of the NBA is changing. And that leads me to my final quote, and then I'll get into you guys and get your thoughts on what you have to say. Where is it? There it is. Where was it? I had it right over here. James has to make a decision. Here it is. Okay. So when talking about the NBA, like the game of basketball, he said, quote, "I think that the game is constantly changing. You have to always be able to look at how things are shifting or how things are shifting back." Bro, it sounds like poetry. It does. For me, quote, "Joel has a lot of attributes offensively and defensively. He's very skilled. Once we start learning each other, we're going to max it out. I can't tell you tactically what that means today, but we are going to put him in situations where he's going to be super dominant." It's all you can ask for. And that was a quote that put a big smile on my face as well. We want Joel to succeed. We want the team to succeed. But when you have a head coach basically telling you that things are changing and he goes over tactically, like how things are changing in the NBA, it's just good to hear. Can it result in winning, though? That's the next question, and he has to back that up. He does. And we'll get to that as the offseason and even during next season, of course. This conversation's not going away. But I do want to open this up to you guys, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you guys have to say. If you guys haven't done so already, please make sure that you join the Discord server and that you come on. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you thought Daryl Morey and Nick Nurse and the whole entire press conference today went at the Camden facility, and if you have any concerns moving forward. You can also type down below. I'm going to get to your messages in just a few moments too. But please make sure that you come onto the Discord server, join the Discord server, and hop on and give your thoughts. All right, let's take a look at some text messages here. All right, so let's see. Josh says, "I love how he wants to get Maxey involved with the pick and roll." Okay, I wrote that down too. That was another quote that I had. Okay, so when talking about Tyrese Maxey, Kyle Neubeck actually was the one that asked him about what he liked about Tyrese Maxey and how he can try to unlock him more. So he said, "The speed and quickness," quote, "sometimes you just can't beat the speed." And that's what he said, like, from the other side, right? Like, when they're facing Tyrese Maxey and that type of a thing. He was so admired by his speed and his quickness. He's got a tremendous chance to improve and take a step forward. And from all indications, that he's hungry to do so. He has a good work ethic, he said. Then he goes into this whole quote about being creative. And I thought that this was really, really interesting when he talked about that. Creating is where is it? I can't even read that. Okay. Creating, scoring, or drawing more people. Okay. And then creating for others. Can he make all the reads? That's the first place I'd like to start off with him offensively, is getting him more reps in the pick and roll, so he can make all those reads depending on what he sees. We like to guard pretty hard, and defensively, we're going to work on that for Maxey. From that quote specifically, that is also a really good sign too, because I've said for so many years that the one reason why I liked James Harden was because I thought that he would actually help Maxey's game ascend, whether it was in the pick and roll or because of the pick and roll, and he would make him more into a scorer and he could take some pressure off of him. Now, if Harden doesn't come back and if the Sixers don't get another star, he's going to get more pressure, but I also believe that that's going to unlock more talent from him. And I love hearing how Nick Nurse wants to go to the pick and roll more because Doc never really gave him a lot of opportunities to do that. And the Sixers, one of the main reasons why they failed in the playoffs is because they didn't run the pick and roll as much as they should have. And when they did run it, the shooters weren't making their shots. It's as plain and simple as that. Stick to the bread and butter and help Tyrese Maxey's game ascend in the pick and roll, I think is a must for the Sixers if they want to reach their ceiling. It's cool. Facilitate more. I love how he wants to get Maxey more frequent opportunities in the pick and roll, and how he wants to incorporate Joel's facilitating and improve him and Tyrese's passing. That's right. Harden is a 1,000% better option than VanVleet. If we sign Fred, it will be the end for us. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that because I also know Fred VanVleet is a good defensive player. That was the last thing I did want to get into about the whole Fred VanVleet rumors. I just hope that we don't give him as much money. That is what I hope for. If it's a 2-year contract, I'm okay with it. I mean, it's not going to fully satisfy me, but I don't know. It's a lose-lose situation. You're in a really tough spot because of what you gave up for James Harden, and you don't know about the injuries and all that type of thing. But that, to me, is a whole nother conversation. But just to tie this all back together in a bow, in regards to the Nick Nurse press conference, I'm a really big fan of what he had to say today. And he even went on to 97.5 The Fanatic and was able to talk on the best show ever and even gave some more awesome quotes, like talked about how much he loves music and, like his passions that he has, like off the, like besides basketball. I didn't know this, but he actually went to school for accounting. And he talked about his passion for basketball and how when he was overseas, he knew that he was going to miss that. So that kind of forced him to basically stay in basketball because of that whole experience that he did have overseas. And there's something to be said about that as well. But yeah, overall, my biggest takeaways from Nick Nurse today were all positive. They were all great, and hopefully, he'll try to get everybody in shape, and the leadership will show. Okay, I'm not telling you that this team is going to make it out of the second round. I don't know what's going to happen with the roster because there's still a lot of things that have to be done. He didn't talk about Tobias Harris today. I thought that was really interesting. It also doesn't surprise me that Tobias Harris and that kind of conversation didn't come up, but I don't know. I was thinking that maybe he was going to acknowledge him, talk about some things that they're going to work on schematically too to try to get him more involved. But no, I thought that was interesting at the same time. But yeah. Last thing I wanted to touch on really quickly was the whole Fred VanVleet thing because I don't know if I buy into it. I don't know if the Sixers will actually get him. I saw the interview. I saw the tweet and everything. He loves Nick Nurse, apparently. He does. And that's great. And I like that. If the Sixers were to get him, would I be happy with it? I'd be happy. But again, I don't want him on a max contract. I don't want James Harden on a max contract either. I just don't. 4 years is too much for James Harden. And is he going to have that killer instinct in him? How will he do in the playoffs? Is he going to still be willing to take a back seat with Joel Embiid there? I mean, there's just so many questions about it. I don't know how the fan base is going to react when he comes back, but that's a whole nother situation. And this conversation about the Sixers is not going to go anywhere. We're still going to be addressing them throughout the offseason, and we'll come on as soon as more and more breaking news comes underway. And this whole Nick Nurse conversation, man, it's not going to go anywhere either. I loved what he had to say today. Now you got to own up to it. Now you got to show it to me on the court, and the players have to listen to you, and the message has to be clear. And with that, we're going to shut things down. I want to thank you all so much for coming on here and tuning in. Make sure that you smash the like button, hit the subscribe button as well. If you guys want to come on in the future to talk about the Sixers or the Phillies with me, we had a really big rage today and almost got into a little bit of some yelling. But that's how the Phillies have been lately. And it's funny how the Sixers have kind of calmed down a little bit. But that's a whole nother thing. I love you guys. We'll be back on tomorrow evening. We'll actually be on tomorrow afternoon to finally talk about the Flyers and Keith Jones being hired as the new president. And we'll talk about that. And we'll also be on for the Phillies game tomorrow night. Hopefully they come out with a win, man. And yeah, keep your eye out for more Sixers content as well. All right, love you guys. Have yourselves an awesome night, and I will see you all tomorrow afternoon. Peace.